Good morning, and thank you for joining us. My name is Ken Opplinger. I'm President and CEO of the Bellingham-Whatcom Chamber of Commerce, and we appreciate you joining us for our Bellingham Mayoral Forum this morning. A couple people to thank before we get started. First of all, we'd like to thank David Norbert, Meg McDowell, and everyone at the Best Western Lakeway Inn and Conference Center for hosting us today, as well as Paxton from Whatcom Sound for doing our sound today. Thank you all very much. We appreciate it. We want to thank two of our patron sponsors today, Puget Sound Energy and Whidbey Island Bank. We appreciate your support of our event today. As many of you know, this event is going to be televised, and so first of all, we'd like to thank Bob Hlebachuk and everyone at KVOS TV for filming the event today, as well as Janice Keller in the City of Bellingham and BTV 10 for showing this on air to folks across the City of Bellingham. Thank you. A couple of things before we get started. If the candidates can go ahead and start to come up to the stage, I'm going to just briefly discuss our debate format today. Each candidate is going to make a 2-minute opening statement, followed by each candidate getting questions. Questions are, of course, coming from the audience. You have forms on your table if you'd like to fill those out. Marvin Riggs in the back. Marvin, you want to wave to everyone? He'll come around and pick those up for you if you just want to hold those up. We'll be reading those from the moderator's podium. Each question will allow a 1-minute and 30-second response from each candidate, plus a 30-second rebuttal period for each candidate that desires it. You can ask questions specifically to any candidate or to the group, but all candidates will have an opportunity to respond. Finally, I know that the professionalism of our candidates is without doubt, but on the offhand chance there's any problem, there is a 10-second knockdown rule that's in force in this debate, and I will send everyone to their corners if we have to. So let's introduce the candidates. Starting from my right, former City of Bellingham Planning Commissioner and former Washington State Representative from the 42nd District, the Honorable Kelly Lenville. A Bellingham native and owner of Public Policy Perspectives, Mr. Clayton Petrie. Clayton. The 20th Mayor of the City of Bellingham and a former transportation planner in Northwest Washington, the Honorable Dan Pike. And a former chairman of the board of the Chamber and owner of Moore & Company Commercial Real Estate, Mr. Steve Moore. The order to start today will be the order in which the candidates filed, and Kelly was the first one to get to the county to do that. So we'll start with her and her 2-minute opening statement. Kelly?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for scheduling this debate and for televising it. It's very good for the community to be able to see all the candidates and what we'd like to see for Bellingham in the next 4 years. I've had the good fortune of being a chamber member for at least 12 years now, and one of the things that I appreciated about the Bellingham Chamber is the ability to identify problems and try to work them through as a group. And so that's what I'd like to do for the City of Bellingham. I was in the legislature for 17 years. I did a lot of policy, and I'm very excited to have the opportunity to actually put some of that policy into practice as the mayor of Bellingham. This is a city that I grew up in, raised my kids in. It's a city I love. And I believe that while we have many lists that we hit, a livable city also has to have affordable housing and jobs so people can recreate, can live and work in the same place. So I'm very interested in our economic development climate. I was chair of the Economic Development Committee at one time. And what we did is we put together some principles so that we knew that any investments we made in infrastructure, in workforce training, in any kind of incentives, were going to actually produce results. And I think Bellingham needs that kind of vision and focus. I am very happy to be endorsed by the realtors, by the city and employees, by the supervisors, and by the Bellingham Police Guild, because I think we need to bring respect, relationships, and results back to City Hall. And I would really appreciate your support.
Thank you, Kelly. Next will be Clayton Petrie.
Hello, my name is Clayton Petrie. I'm a 37-year-old Bellingham native, and I've been a small business owner for the past 5 years in Bellingham. Thank you for doing business in Bellingham. I understand how difficult it can be here, and especially if you're successful and want to grow your business. We're all aware there's a growing list of businesses that have already packed up and relocated. I believe private sector economic growth is absolutely key to the future of Bellingham. Government doesn't create jobs. It takes money away from the hardworking private sector to pay public employees that we have to have. It takes many private sector jobs to pay for a single government employee. The average local private sector employee in Whatcom County earns 74% of the Washington state average, while the average local government employee is compensated 11% higher. Government doesn't truly contribute to the local economy. Conversely, the private sector business is the largest contributor to the coffers in City Hall. You're very important. You pay all the B&O, all the sales, you pay huge utility and stormwater fees, and a big proportion of the property taxes and other fees the city collects, only to see part of your money funding nonprofit organizations that oppose free enterprise. There's plenty of opportunity for everyone in a city this size, big and small. How much revenue did Costco and City Hall lose when we didn't allow them to expand a few years ago? How about when we turned away Winco? How many people who would have stopped at local restaurants and shops now visit Ferndale or drove to Burlington or Everett instead? At a forum recently, the mayor said, "It's not my responsibility to make sure business makes money." That kind of attitude hurts Bellingham. My main focus is fiscal responsibility. Besides making good spending choices, one of the most effective ways to increase revenue and to help the city maintain a balanced budget is to build business in Bellingham. After all, without businesses, there aren't jobs, there aren't wages, and there aren't very many fees or taxes to collect. Thank you.
Thank you, Clayton. Next, Mayor Pike.
Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be before you this morning and talk about both what I've done in the last 4 years and what I'm looking forward to doing going forward. So 4 years ago, actually I took office a little bit early, November 27th, 2007, and it took 3 days until a global recession hit, the biggest economic downturn of our lifetimes, on December 1st of 2007. And in that environment, the city's come out really well. We've actually been well managed. We've gotten a bond rating upgrade from Standard & Poor's where they specifically cited management and the administration as keys to their decision to give us that upgrade. At a time when the state increased its spending by over 8%, the city decreased its spending by 16% across all programs and 11% in its general fund expenditures, making sure that we were operating on a more sustainable basis, and we're continuing to move in that direction as we look at what's coming down the line. Government may not create jobs, but I can tell you that as we're looking at the gridlock in DC over lifting or not lifting the debt ceiling and knowing that whatever comes out of there, there's going to be trillions of dollars of cut from the federal budgets, and knowing that the state budget is also going to be shrinking going forward in the near term. As a city, we need to manage ourselves more and more carefully. That means we need to think about what we spend, how we spend it, what we do, how we do it. Make sure that we take care of ourselves first. My job is to promote and protect and preserve what's good about Bellingham, and that's what I've done in the last 4 years. That's what I intend to continue doing going forward. This is not a time to take a chance on somebody that's unproven, so I would appreciate your continued support, and I value the opportunity to continue being your mayor going forward. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dan. Steve?
Good morning. Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Chamber Board of Directors, for sponsoring this forum. 3.5 years ago, in November of 2007, I stood in this very room. And at that time, I took the gavel from Roger Long to become the chairman of the board of the Chamber. And some of you were here, in fact, you were here. And I stood out in front and I said, are all of you as irritated as I am about the word activist? And I started listing a litany of political activists, environmental activists, citizen activists, community activists, and on and on and on. And I pledged that night to 300 some odd people that I was going to be an activist also, a business activist. And 3.5 years later, I'm still there. And now, in the last month and a half, I'm running for mayor to still be active in promoting the business community. I'm an open book. What you see is what you get. I'm not a native of Bellingham, and it kind of irritates me that that's supposed to be some mantra and some free pass as to why everyone should vote for you. You can't choose who your parents are, and you can't choose where you're born, but you can choose where you live. And 21 years ago, I moved here with my family, sold my company in California, and chose Bellingham amongst all the cities between Olympia and here after interviewing all of them for a month and a half. When I'm mayor, starting in January of 2012, I will continue to promote business, to stop overregulation of business, and business is two things: retention, and to allow people to work and live here in Bellingham, and also the job creation. Business is the driving force behind what we do. If it's not for the business community, taxes aren't going to the city. If it's not for the business community and working families, then why do we even exist to do anything else at all? So ladies and gentlemen, I would ask your support. I would ask for your help. I started this late. It's a run, and I'm having a great time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. I'll remind everyone here in the audience today that we do have sheets on your tables. You can provide questions for the candidates, and we will moderate them through the podium here. Marvin Riggs in the back again will come by, so once you get those filled out, just hold them up and he'll come by and pick them up from you. I will go ahead and ask the first question, and this will go to Clayton. This is on waterfront redevelopment. When the port first acquired the former Georgia Pacific site, there was a sense in this community that we would soon have a downtown that opened onto our waterfront, providing both public access and new jobs. 6.5 years later, there are those in the community that are beginning to wonder not just when, but if redevelopment will occur. How would you work with the Port of Bellingham to realize this community vision of a mixed-use, redeveloped waterfront?
Well, I think it's been longer than 6.5 years now, but more like 8. And one of the biggest problems is there's just not enough positive communications. You know, we have a city council meeting where they talk about it, and then there was WAG meetings where they talk about it separately. I'd like to see more joint meetings, and I think that there's been too much emphasis on extremely high density development as opposed to working on what gets people down there. What got people to go down there before was their job. We had, you know, the pulp mill there, and in turn, when people went down there, they would stop by downtown on their way home and, you know, buy work boots and stop at the restaurants and things like that. I think that when we work with the port is good at producing jobs land, and we need to work with them on that first and worry about the residential and high density mixed use later down the road.
Thank you. Dan?
Well, actually, I spent from 7 a.m. yesterday until 6 p.m. meeting with the port director and staff, actually hammering out a fairly good rough draft of what we anticipate turning over to the Port Commission, the Planning Commission, and City Council later this year as a development agreement. You know, if you're going to do something, it's important that you do it right. And so while it's convenient to forget the history that got us here, why it took a while, let me refresh your memory a little bit. When I took office, the port had a vision of doing a development that essentially was a Bellevue in the middle of the waterfront site that would have damaged our downtown. It would have hurt the businesses that are already existing downtown, that are working hard, paying our taxes, supporting this community, and have been for a long time. It also wasn't consistent with the vision that this community had for how the waterfront should be redeveloped, that it should redevelop in a way that complemented downtown and helped us move forward as a community, building our tax base and also providing amenities for the community. So we had a series of meetings in that regard. And following that, it was very clear where the community stood. They stood with the vision that I was articulating, which is we build out, we work with businesses, and build something appropriate to strengthen what we already have. And so that's what we're doing. That's what's coming out of the meeting that we had yesterday. And that's the kind of work that I've done and I will continue doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Steve?
Thank you. For 37 years, I've worked with developers. I'm a commercial real estate broker. And for 6.5 or 8 years, however it's long, I've watched the Georgia Pacific properties sit there and languish doing nothing other than tearing down buildings. I'm glad to hear that Dan met with some people yesterday, because once you start putting the shovels in the ground, nothing's going to happen. This idea that investors are going to flock to come and do something there is erroneous. If they don't see consistency, excuse me, if they don't see some consistency in the rules and regulations that are going to be imposed upon them, if they don't see the reason why they should invest their money, their time, and their energy into redeveloping that waterfront, they're not going to line up. Trust me, I've been trying to do this for 37 years on different projects, and they do not line up. Consequently, and I heard this term, and I thought it was kind of a cute term, we've had 6 years of shelf art with binders sitting on the shelves. It's time to stop studying, and it's time to start doing something. Put the shovel in the ground, create the jobs, and let's move forward. The way that this is going to work out, it will happen. But we need to make sure that the city of Bellingham and the port of Bellingham sit down and are on the same page and get it going. It's a dynamic thing, and it will change over time, but we can't keep looking at it and thinking something else might happen.
Thank you, Steve. Kelly?
Well, waterfront redevelopment is something that I am very passionate about. And I actually have done something on the watershed. The first thing was to make sure that we had the Model Toxics Control Act money, the hazardous waste money, to start cleaning up the site, and that we could plan on that money and count on that money for more than 2 years. The second thing is we passed a local infrastructure funding tool called LIFT that gave us Bellingham $25 million 6.5 years ago so that we could match private development with public dollars. We have not spent 1 penny of that money. In my mind, there's several things that have slowed up this process. Of course the economy's been bad, but that doesn't mean you can't have a good working relationship with the port, and it doesn't start at 7 o'clock last night, and it doesn't start with lawsuits. It starts with talking about a common goal. I personally agree with the fact that high impact development in the middle of the port property is probably not a good idea. But I have a working relationship with the port already. I believe that we need to look at access using existing infrastructure to get some jobs. I think that the port is willing to talk about that, and I believe that the City Council and the Port Commissioners are going to get together because they want to have a productive conversation about what's going to happen in the waterfront. It's far too little too late.
Clayton, 30-second rebuttal.
I just wanted to add that I've talked to some of the port officials, and I know that they're trying to work on a change to the plan right now that would include a significant area for clean and high-tech jobs. So that I really agree with that move for them, and I would try and support them if they decide to change the plan that's in existence today to accommodate that.
Thank you. Dan?
Well, first of all, I want to be clear that yesterday's meeting didn't start at 7 last night. It was far from the first meeting. We've had meetings ongoing. The very first meeting I had was December 2nd, 2007, and I've had innumerable meetings since then. And in fact, I've been working with the port on identifying what Clayton is just talking about, that the opportunity on the south end of the site should be reserved for probably the next 30-plus years for jobs creation. And so we are working on that as part of the plan. That was it? Okay. Anyway, there's a lot going on in the port. It's a long, complex project, and I have been working on it on the community's behalf for a long time.
Steve?
Contrary to Kelly's statement that she's not in favor of high-impact development, the city of Bellingham is on record of stating that they want to have infill in the downtown, which is a high-impact use, by either residential, by apartments, more retail, more office. I believe strongly that that acreage down there does need to have high-impact development. It's exactly what the city has been promoting for years. Urban infill, that is urban. I have an outstanding relationship with the Port of Bellingham, have had since I moved here in 1990. In fact, I was told that I was the first broker that they ever actually paid a commission to because I brought them a major tenant.
Kelly?
Let me clarify. I believe that there should be water-dependent use on the shoreline of the waterfront development. I believe that the middle of the development that potentially has some environmental concerns could be light industrial, and I believe that the development should start in the center of Bellingham, which is Old Town, and grow out from the city center, so we don't have another Bellis Fair effect on the downtown, which they haven't recovered from yet. When Bellis Fair moved in to Bellingham, the downtown suffered.
Thank you all. Next question is going to be on our city planning department, and we'll begin with Dan Pike. By most measures, the city of Bellingham has made great strides over the last 4 years in making the city's planning and permitting process more user-friendly and more customer-oriented. Is there more work to be done? And if so, what are your priorities to ensure those seeking to build in Bellingham are given the best possible impression of our city?
Well, certainly we have worked really hard on this over the last 4 years, and I think we've made great strides. In fact, I've heard Charlie Hudson, when he was president of the BIA, acknowledge the same thing. But it'll never be done, because I think as government, our job is to be responsive to the stakeholders, the citizens, the folks doing business with us, and make sure that we're trying to find ways to work in a way that meets the regulatory purposes, in other words, public safety and health, while also reducing to the greatest extent possible the impact those burdens put on businesses and residents and other folks interfacing with the city. And so I would say we aren't done, but what we have worked on is trying to do things that provide both a voice for business. So for example, I created the Office of Business Relations and Economic Development, headed by Tara Sundin, to help businesses if they're interfacing with the city, if they're thinking about landing here or growing here, and they're uncertain about how to manage the processes, to help walk them through that, to help hook them up with different groups and different folks both inside and outside the city that can help them. I've also worked with Jeff Thomas in identifying what processes we need to work on. We've been working on that a lot. We also did a key hire in hiring Jim Tinner as our new building official, who I think brought some common sense to the regulatory aspects of that position. I will continue working on those common sense approaches, having the conversations that I've been having, that I've been going around with you and with other folks, meeting with businesses in the community to find out what's working and what's not, and continue making improvements going forward.
Thank you. Steve?
For 21, for 21 years, I have dealt intimately with both the planning department and the building department of the city of Bellingham, sometimes on 2 and 3 times a day. About 8 years ago, I basically beat up Mark Osmondson because I was getting irritated that it was taking 6, 12, 18 weeks or more to get a simple little building permit for a commercial tenant improvement. Mark finally, through Preston Burrison himself, established a permit center. It wasn't exactly what I envisioned. We should have been able to do some things in an hour or 2 hours. So that happened. As far as the planning department and the building department, it's really simple, ladies and gentlemen. We need to do 2 things immediately. Stop the overregulation and the interpretation, which many times is a personal interpretation by staff as to what the rules are. I constantly say to people, including landlords, tenants, builders, developers, and contractors, when you go to City Hall and they say no, just make the simple statement, would you please read beyond the comma? Because after the comma, it says, however, in this instance, we need to get the planning and building department on the mantra of saying, yes, how do we help you do this, instead of saying, no, go back and redesign it, and at that point, we'll tell you if we like that design. I am tired of staff-driven personal agendas at City Hall by staff telling you and I what we can't do, instead of telling us what we can do.
Thank you, Steve. Kelly?
We need performance-based regulation. I was just in a neighborhood meeting last night, and they said, how will you be able to help neighborhoods, and this is a neighborhood that's concerned about the kind of growth that might happen in it, how do you help us get the kind of infill and growth that we believe we need to have, and do it in a way that isn't cookie cutter across the whole city? And that's something that I'm passionately committed to, is performance-based regulations, rules about impact fees and taxes that are applied evenly and that are predictable and have some consistency for people so they can plan ahead. I think that it's great to work on things. People work on things all the time. Sometimes hamsters work in running a wheel, but working on things and achieving things are two different things. And I believe that the achievements for making regulations more streamlined, for protecting our environment, because people come here and stay here because they like to live here. So we don't want to get rid of the regulation, the goals of the regulation that keep our water clean, our air clean, and have a good planning environment, but we need to make it simpler and more common sense. And I want to bring that common sense planning and performance-based regulation to city halls so that we can get what we want.
Thank you, Kelly. Clayton?
Well, I think that the planning department and the permit department have made baby steps in efficiency as far as getting an application to a project. Even this morning, somebody mentioned to me, well, it's just so difficult to get a house permit through. Somebody that I know that builds single-family houses in Bellingham, it took them 9 months to get a single house permit. And they were working hard at getting it. The biggest problem seems to be that there just isn't the proper amount of staff to look at all the different applications. And I know it's been slow, but I talked to I called up a couple developers that are working on projects in Bellingham right now, and they said it took 2 months for somebody just to look at their plans. And that was with them calling every week to see what was going on, and they just get put on the back burner. I'm not sure what's exactly is going on in the permit department, but I've managed production lines and managed people, and I think that we just need to get some good leadership in there that can go in and figure out exactly why things are taking so long and get more efficiency in the permit department.
Thank you, Clayton. Dan, 30-second rebuttal.
Sure. First, I want to start off by saying, I think we have great employees in the city of Bellingham. And so, Mark Asmussen said to me once that anytime you have 800 employees, occasionally one or two will do things that are crazy or stupid. And that's a reality in any group of 800 or 900 people. But we have great employees overall, and the permit department is doing a very good job overall compared to where they were 4 years ago. And two quick examples. In April, I got a call from Costco. The manager said, I forgot I wanted to submit this permit to expand our dairy case. Can you see what you can do to get that through? So I sent it down. I called down to the planning department. It was a day. Wes Hermans, who runs the Woods Coffee, came to a meeting, and somebody was complaining about permitting. He said, I want to tell you my story. I had one permit that took me over 4 months for a simple permit. I was really irritated. But he said, since the mayor's made his changes, I got the same permit in 4 days. So there have been real changes. You can make any stories you want, and I'm not saying that some of them aren't true, but I'm saying by and large, the experience today is much, much different, much, much more positive than it was 4 years ago.
Steve?
Is that rebuttal 30 seconds?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll remind all the candidates that Sheila's got the little cards out there. If I have to, I'll start stepping in.
We've seen her.
In most communities around the country, there's basically 3 different zones: commercial, residential, and industrial. Bellingham has those also. But are you aware that in the city of Bellingham, because of the neighborhood system that's set up, there's actually 344 different zones? While it can go fast, and everybody wants consistency of planning, consistency of permitting. Oh, you counted the time when I was asking how long it was?
You can have 15 seconds more.
Thank you. The neighborhoods can screw everything up in a heartbeat. You can go do everything you have to do and look for consistency, and then the neighborhood can override you and countermand you.
Thank you, Steve. Kelly?
Well, I always was frustrated when agencies could not make a decision for a constituent, but if I called, they could. I don't think the mayor's intervention should be what citizens have to depend on to have things done effectively. And secondly, I think we do have great employees. I would never blame the employees from the leadership at the top. I think that the attitude about making things happen well, happen fast, happen consistently come from the leader of the city, which is the mayor.
Clayton?
I think it's really great that some of the permits have come through fast. What banks, what lenders, what developers, and what potential business owners need is consistency. We need every permit to happen that fast. And when something's zoned for a use, it needs to be quick and easy. Ferndale's promised 2 weeks. I'm not going to say that I'm going to promise 2 weeks right away, but if other cities can do that, we certainly can improve our permit time.
Thank you, Clayton. We're going to switch over to a question about police staffing, and this comes from the audience, and we'll start with Mr. Moore. Currently, our city is down per capita about 12 police officers. As we grow, and understanding that it will cost roughly $2 million to add these officers, how will you go about addressing this need?
Not spending $8.8 million on Chuckanut Ridge. The first thing that need to be done by any city, regardless, is you must fulfill the needs of its citizens first. I'm in sales, and anybody that's in sales knows it's needs, wants, and desires. And needs have to come first, and if you don't fulfill the needs of your customer, that customer being us, the citizens of Bellingham, then the wants and desires that you might want to go spend money on are superfluous. We need police, we need fire, we need parks maintenance, we need road maintenance. So I'm absolutely appalled that government, city government, would even make the offer or make the attempt to spend $8.8 million, or whatever the number is, for Chuckanut Ridge when we don't have the money, number one. When if we did have the money, we would be paying for those 12 policemen, and we would be doing those things that we as citizens and the stakeholder, and actually we're the employer of the city. If we don't have the money, we can't spend it. If we have the money to spend superfluously, then let's use it where it's supposed to be done: police, fire, infrastructure, and not on things that we really don't need. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Kelly?
Well, I think that we need to prioritize our services, and I think that the employees have good ideas about how to do that, and you need to engage them. Right now, we have a 911 system where people call constantly to report things that aren't really emergencies because they have nowhere else to go. And I think that when we look at our police service, we need to make sure that we have the right number of officers. That's one of public health and safety are our two primary responsibilities as a city. And then we need to be sure that we're staffing those the way we need to. But we also need to look at innovative ideas of how we can take our funding and stretch it further. I would rely on employees to bring those forward, as I did with the Teamwork Incentive Bill, where you're saying, hey, you come up with innovative ways to take these dollars and save money or stretch the services for better results, and there will be incentives for you too, as we give incentives to others. So I think that we haven't prioritized our essential services, basically using the financial plan that exists in the city right now, where we look at federal, state requirements, hard to change, city ordinances, easier to change, council initiatives, very easy to change, and we need to make sure that public health and safety is prioritized first.
Thank you, Kelly. Clayton?
Well, the question is, how do you fund 12 more police officers? 6 costs about $750,000 a year, so you're talking $1.5 million. We have a $200 million budget. It comes down to priorities and maintaining your level of service on the most important things, on the needs. So absolutely, we need to prioritize the maintenance of police level of service above other things. Fire, police, water, sewer, roads, and maintaining your buildings are key things that the city has to do well. The police are doing very well with what they have, but we aren't doing very well in maintaining their safety with low number of officers and overworking them. So we have a lot of money, it's just not being prioritized correctly, and that's how I would fund that. I'd prioritize them over other things that the city might want to do but doesn't have to do.
Thank you, Clayton. Dan?
Well, thanks. Well, I'd like to provide a little clarity. You can't take the money that we're going to spend on Chuckanut Ridge and spend it someplace else. It's park funds and greenways funds. Those are dedicated funding sources approved by the voters of this community for those purposes. So while it's nice to say you take those funds and spend them on the police, unless you want the police to haul you to jail, you can't do it. In terms of general fund revenues, it's the city's funding overall for general funds, which is where police come out of, is about $63 million, not $192 million. Do you know what the only department is that has not had a year-to-year decline in its budget any year during my administration? It's police. The only area of the city that has not seen cuts in staffing is public safety, so police and fire and dispatch. The reality is on a per officer basis, the police have a lower caseload now than they did 4 years ago. And the reason is because we are using innovative techniques. We're using computers, we're using new techniques in how we manage things, doing more with less. The ratios have actually been changing, not because we've added officers, but because around the state, other departments are laying off because their cities haven't managed through this crisis as well as the city of Bellingham has. Now, one of the reasons the Police Guild chose to not endorse me is they felt that I should add police officers at a time that I was cutting severely in other departments. And I said, I'm not going to make further cuts to parks or libraries to add police. I'm willing to look at things like traffic cameras as an alternative. I haven't heard anybody else say whether they would add revenues or what departments they would cut from the general fund to make these, to add the positions they think need to be added.
Thank you, Dan. 30-second rebuttal. Steve?
I hope I misunderstood your question, and that was $2.2 million for 12 policemen?
That's what the writer of the question in the audience wrote. I believe they wrote $2 million for 12 policemen.
Well, that's $180,000 per person. And would you all raise your hand if any of you are making $180,000 a year? Because I certainly not. Oh, thank you, John. Good. Harold's overpaying you. Come on. $180,000 per person. I don't even care if the questioner's number was wrong. We need police and fire. We need to take care of it. We need to fill the needs first.
Kelly?
Well, one reason that we have not cut police officers is they're already understaffed. So to cut something that's already understaffed would make no sense at all. I still believe that even if we get to the red light cameras, the idea of the red light cameras was obviously for safety first, not for revenue. And if you look at the studies that I've looked at, the revenue doesn't necessarily come with the cameras. So I want to make sure that we're not just looking at how to raise money. When we look at public safety, we're looking at how to actually keep the public safe, and that's with officers.
Clayton?
Well, the best way to grow revenue, of course, is to grow business in Bellingham. They pay a lot of the taxes, a big proportion, and they don't add population to the city. We have a very mismatched set of land in the way that it's zoned, and we need to look at, I mean, if you look at any of the studies, they talk about how commercial growth is where most of the growth is going to occur, and we have our land zoned for industrial in a ratio of about 1 to 10. It's mismatched, and you grow revenue with growth in business.
Thank you. Dan?
Well, again, I want to just point out that as a Bellingham resident, you're safer now than you were 4 years ago. That's the basic metric of public safety. Are you better now than you were before? The police are doing a great job. I would disagree that they're understaffed. Our crime rate compares favorably to one of the safest communities in Western Washington. We've been doing a good job with what we have. And just to address quickly the costs, that's not just a cost for the salary of the police officer. It's a cost for the police car that goes with that, the guns, the computers, the other equipment. It's all very expensive. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. All right, we're going to switch over to a Lake Whatcom question, and we will start with Kelly on this one. 4 years ago, water quality in Lake Whatcom was a major issue in the mayoral and city council races. Since then, reports indicate the water quality continues to decline due to increasing levels of phosphorus and decreasing dissolved oxygen levels. Do you believe current efforts to address water quality are sufficient? And if not, what do you plan to do in order to ensure Bellingham and Whatcom County have a clean, safe source of drinking water into the future?
Well, first of all, we need to use the committee that's established to make sure that everybody is doing their part, the Water and Sewer District, the county, and the city. The city has the most development in the watershed, and I believe that it's not necessarily that the city hasn't tried to do something. I believe that what the city has tried to do has not been effective. You can buy pieces of property outside the city of Bellingham to help preserve water quality. I understand that. But if you look at what's going on with the Silver Beach ordinance, it's a very expensive, top-down regulatory approach that is not getting many takers. It's costing a lot of money to have someone go around and try to get people signed up for a program that can cost $75,000 in engineering before you do one piece of thing on your property. I would say we should go to a zero discharge standard on on Lake Whatcom, meaning that we would have a standard by which to judge every single action we take. That way, we could do what we did on the Nooksack River. In 1 year, we saw substantial reductions in fecal coliform on the Nooksack River when we went property owner by property owner and said, what can you do? Right now, we're expecting a few people, 60 right now have signed up, to do everything, very expensive. I think we could get, through education, technical assistance, incentives and enforcement, maybe 600 people to do a little bit and keep pollution from running into the lake.
Thank you, Kelly. Clayton?
Well, I think that some of the new projects we're doing are a great start, but one of the biggest enemies is still Bellingham. We spent $22 million on land acquisition, and it didn't improve lake quality. That money should have been used on projects inside of Bellingham instead. So I would like to see a voter-approved continuation of the land acquisition fund in the form of a watershed restoration and improvement fund to do more of those projects that we've started doing now. And I don't know if you guys know this, but we charge 50% more for services that the city provides outside the city limits. I would like to see the city dedicate the entire 50% surcharge for additional projects. So no, we haven't done the proper things in the past. We've begun doing some really great projects in the last few years, and I think we need to concentrate on Bellingham's pollution into the lake instead of some of the lawsuits that the city's been doing recently that I don't think are going to make very much of a difference out in the county. Once the community's satisfied that we've done everything that we can do to reduce or stop our own pollution, then we should look at projects outside of the city and its growth area.
Thank you, Clayton. Dan?
Well, first of all, I think one of the biggest things we can do is support the reconveyance of 8,400 plus acres of timberland in the watershed to permanent preservation from development. While you can say that the land hasn't stopped degradation, you don't know what would have happened had we not done that. I agree that we need to be spending some of those funds on other sources, and I've been working with the council to change what we can use some of those funds on. That was a council decision on how those funds could be spent. But we have spent a lot of money over the last few years trying to address the problem, and with mixed results. This year, the lake quality got worse. Last year, for the first time in 20 years, it didn't get worse. So we're making some progress. Part of what we're doing is we're expending money, finding out what does and doesn't work, and that's a problem when you're the one on the cutting edge. Phosphorus is not the same as fecal coliform, which is a much easier problem to solve. Phosphorus removal is challenging. So, for example, the filters we put in our street basins used to only catch 35% of the phosphorus. Thanks to the analysis we've done, the research that we've been central in, it now reduces over 70%, but that's not good enough. But we're making progress. We're finding what does work, what doesn't work. We're using the example that Western has developed up for its campus and looking at expanding that. There's a lot of things we need to do. We need to continue working on this problem because it is our drinking water, and that's it.
It's time. Steve?
Great question, been asked for 21 years that I know of that I've been here. Look at the city map, look at the map of Lake Whatcom, and the city owns this little teeny piece of it. The mayor, the city council, city staff is not supposed to be involved in trying to regulate somebody else's piece of property. They do that good enough. within our own city limits through permits and fees and everything else. Why don't we look at the real cause of the problem, and that's that which already exists, not something that doesn't exist in the future. We can't say because we built something in the future we're going to make it worse. It's already bad. So let's look at what's causing the issue today. And that issue today is we can spend money, we put these little Band-Aids, and not even big Band-Aids or little ones, on that which is already around the lake. Let's do stormwater. Let's do those things that are going to clean up the lake. Let's not start going out and buying other pieces of property to which we have no control over anyway. And to actually go out and say, we're going to do this when we're looking for urban growth, when we're looking for infill development, when we're looking to spend money within our own city limits, which the mayors and city council can control. Why are we buying property that we don't even have ownership of and taking that not only out of development, but out of private use in a checkerboard pattern and attempt to clean up a lake? It's absurd.
Thanks, Steve. Kelly?
Well, I support the reconveyance because it's a county activity that's going on. The city has offered to pay some of the ongoing maintenance, but the county is responsible for this. They are going to get over 8,000 acres for just over $200,000. It's a pretty good bargain if you look costs per acre, and I think that's something that we absolutely should do. But I beg to differ about phosphorus and fecal coliform. Phosphorus is a large component of fecal coliform, and it is it was going in the water,
Right.
sorry.
Well, I'll tell you what, the DNR property isn't going to be developed into houses. What we really need to focus on is Bellingham's property and the runoff that pollutes the lake from Bellingham. And I talked about a few ways that I think we can fund it. We don't have excess money at this time. Perhaps we can come up with some more funding so we can do even more projects. The area out there is scheduled to be removed from the UGA in 2012, and we might want to look at annexing that so we control it in the future.
Thank you, Clayton. Dan?
When you're in a hole, you need to stop digging. Bellingham only owns a small piece of the hole. So if we don't address the development that happens in the county piece, whatever Bellingham does will be insufficient to protect the drinking water source for all of us, for 100,000 people. And furthermore, the city's water right is the oldest property right in the watershed. So we're protecting our property rights, and we're going and we're talking to people in the county about what is and is not appropriate development. And so we do need to pay attention to that. And logging is as damaging, or can be as damaging, as household development in the watershed.
Thank you, Dan. Steve?
Do we want to put a real dent in the degradation of the lake? Sure. How do we do that? We start using science-based facts and not emotionally charged, innuendo, biased information that gets everybody riled up emotionally. Let's start using science instead of emotion.
Thank you, Steve. All right, we'll move to a question on tourism, and this is from the audience, and we'll start with Clayton. Countywide, the tourism industry represents $435 million in direct visitor spending. Nationwide, tourism is outperforming many industry sectors in job creation. How will your administration embrace and support the tourism industry?
Well, I think a lot of the tourism is outside of the city, but we can definitely support tourism in Whatcom County as a whole by helping tourist companies and hotels and other things like that, bike shops, thrive in Bellingham. We have some of that right now, and I fully support maybe even some zone-specific or industry-specific zoning in some parts of the city where we can help those kinds of businesses thrive. We have an amazing place to come visit, and people already visit. They come to Galbraith, they go to Baker, they go fishing, kayaking, and all that. And the more we can help tourist-oriented businesses in Bellingham thrive, the more we'll support that countywide.
Thank you, Clayton. Dan?
Well, I think You know, the reason people want to come here for tourism is because of the community that we are, because of the amenities we have, because of the ambiance we have within the community, and the fact that we're situated between Puget Sound and Mount Baker in one of the most beautiful areas on earth. I think the way we work on improving this going forward is to do things like we are doing. For example, you know, the Tourism Commission does a great job of working on a limited budget, getting folks in from out of town to do magazine articles about different things that people from other places might think about doing here. And then those articles actually do drive a lot of visitors to this community. If they're successful, those visitors stay in hotels, they generate hotel, motel, bed tax, things like that, which then again funds the Tourism Commission to continue doing their good work. And so one of the things that we're doing, for example, is looking and giving them an incentive-based contract that says, okay, you'll get a certain percent of those dollars coming in. I think that's a great way to match motivation for the city to get more people coming in here, spending their dollars, helping our tax base, and motivating the Tourism Commission, the Tourism Bureau, to do the things that will actually help their bottom line as well. And so it's a win-win situation. We help the businesses that are tourism dependent. We help the people that are helping those businesses get the word out about what a great community, what a great place this is. And at the end of the day, we all benefit because folks from other places come, spend money, go away, and we get the tax dollars to help support our community.
Thank you, Dan. Steve?
There's an old saying, usually when we go to the big cities like on the East Coast, it's a great place to visit, but who'd want to live there? Well, Bellingham's the complete opposite of that. Great place to live, but who wants to visit? I think what Lonnie Raum does and her entire tourism bureau is phenomenal. We bring in that $435 million. You're out there fighting constantly to bring those dollars to the business community, out there fighting constantly to bring tourism so that it's outside dollars spent within the city. Great idea. But after the tourists leave, do we ever ask them, what was it you liked about the city, and are you willing to come back once you've been here the first time? You drive in off of the freeway, and you come down, let's say Lakeway, and then you come down Ellis and then into Holly, and we need to clean up downtown. We have these great signs sticking on poles by the traffic signals, welcome to downtown, do this and this and this, and we need to keep people there. We need to have them spend their money there. We need to clean it up. If I was going to a city and I drove down by Cornwall or down Chestnut or along Boulevard and saw that ugly monstrosity of the GP plant sitting there with derelict buildings, holes in them, windows broken out, I would question, now maybe I'm different, I am odd, I would question what's going on there, as my wife says I'm not normal, but I would question, why is that sitting there? If I came back a couple of years later because I loved the city of Bellingham and what it was available to me for tourism, and it was still sitting there, I'd have some real second thoughts about coming back again.
Thank you, Steve. Kelly?
Well, I think tourism is a great way to get money into the community without having many of the impacts that happen with some of the growth. So it's kind of a freebie of benefit, but it does take investment to have good programs that let people know what's available here. This is the first year that the state of Washington is investing no money in its tourism budget. So it isn't necessarily possible for local communities to take that whole amount of slack up. I brought a group of people here once, and I took them everywhere. I took them to Doug's plant down on the waterfront. I took them to Fairhaven. I took them out to the Mount Baker, and I asked them what they thought. They thought that Bellingham was a wonderful place. They didn't even know we existed before, because they think sometimes that Washington State ends in Everett, and anything north of Everett is all farmland or something like that. So you have to get people in the door. I think the public-private partnership the state formed was a really good idea, because businesses benefit and the public sector benefits from money that's spent on tourism. We need to look at what we can do at the local level potentially to make that same partnership a reality and working well. And I do think that we've had several very dynamic Convention and Visitor Bureau directors, including John and Lonnie, that have had very innovative ideas that can get Bellingham recognized on the map. But you're not going to see us when you see come to Michigan, come to the red card.
Thank you, Kelly. Wait, rebuttal.
Mountain biking is definitely one of my passions, and I recently had an article about the public use of private land in Dirt Rag magazine about Galbraith Mountain, and I've already met a fair amount of people that have come here to visit Bellingham because of the mountain and that article. I totally disagree with Steve that Bellingham isn't a nice place to visit. It's a wonderful place. Everybody I've talked to loves to go to Boundary Bay and Chucknut Brewery and all these places, and sometimes they stay.
Dan?
Yeah, I'm going to echo a little bit what Clayton said, which is that if you're going down to Railroad Avenue on a Saturday, you won't find a parking space between the farmers market and all the way down by the Bellingham Public Market, because so many people from out of town are coming in to enjoy Bellingham. So I think we have a great tourism program in place. It's getting better every year. And I think that we need to continue looking at ways to foster partnerships between the city, the county, other entities, and the Tourism Bureau. But I think they're doing a good job overall.
Steve?
If I said it wasn't a great place to visit, then I misspoke. It's a great place to visit, but some of us sometimes, or some groups, don't want people to stay. Come spend your money and then go home. I tell everybody that comes here that Bellingham's a 90-minute city. 90 minutes from the mountain, 90 minutes from the islands, 90 minutes from Vancouver, and 90 minutes from Seattle. So we can have all the advantages of all the stuff, but not have to put up with all the issues. I think tourism is great, and I cannot say enough about what Lonnie does through the Tourism Bureau. And as mayor, I will continue to support that. And I think it's great, the idea that you had. I didn't know you guys were doing that with this, I guess, movement of funds in a different direction. That's great.
And Kelly, would you like to end our We Love Lonnie debate here?
Well, I think I already contributed to that, but I think that the mayor mentioned an issue that does need to be addressed if we want people to come to downtown, and that is parking. I think we need to look at how we're spending the parking funds and make sure that when people come to Bellingham, they don't drive around Railroad Avenue endlessly like you do at Bellevue Square, waiting for someone to back up so you can jump in their parking place.
Thank you all. Next question, we'll start with Dan, and this is a question from the audience. Why is the city fire marshal for speeding / imposing the 2009 Federal Fire Code on previously permitted buildings which were issued occupancy permits?
Because fire regulations change over time as we get better information, and without naming names, I will tell you that there was one business that was practicing a very unsafe practice that was discovered because of this, that put potentially thousands of people at risk, and we're working with them to not put them out of business, to not close them down, but to make sure that the situation becomes safe. And had we not had this program in place, we would not have discovered this. This is something that frankly could have been very, very dangerous for this community. And that's why we have public safety, to protect this community. So that's why we're doing it.
Thank you, Dan. Steve?
I believe the current fire marshal has a personal agenda. He was brought online. We all thought this was going to be great, but because of his position as fire marshal, and he actually sat in a room with me and said that he was the policeman and that he was authorized to wear a sidearm and that he was the new sheriff in town. And when he told a group of individuals, about 30 of us, that, I couldn't believe what I heard. I have been involved in more things regarding fire and fire sprinklers since August of 2010 than I ever wanted to know regarding the fire issues. It's a personally driven agenda. It is driven by him specifically and some of his staff. And as a commercial real estate broker, I can tell you unequivocally that there are businesses that have been in this community for 15, 20, 30, and 40 years who, to quote one of the fire inspectors, have been tagged by them. And when I have clients who own development parks and are told right up front, oh, by the way, we're going to go out and target your property next week, that has got to stop. That's garbage, people. And I will say right now, as your mayor, we're going to discuss his continued employment.
Thank you, Steve. Kelly?
I definitely believe that obviously fire safety is very important because we've seen disasters, we know what happens, and those kind of things don't go away very easily. I also think that you can do a non-regulatory inspection program without requiring everyone to do something where violations might exist. So why don't we focus on the people that are creating the hazards instead of potentially adding a large amount of expense to everybody. So if you can have someone do inspections and not necessarily make enormous requirements on everybody, if somebody is acting in a safe manner, if someone does have previous permit, then I think that we're kind of doing the right thing. We're focusing on offenders, and we're encouraging businesses to stay here.
Thank you, Kelly. Clayton?
I agree that it's the fire department's job to make sure the people of Bellingham are safe and not violating any regulations we have. But as I've been campaigning, I've had a plenitude of complaints from people about maybe some overreach and aggressive tactics, and these people believe that it's a money grab. I don't know if it is or isn't, and as mayor, that'd be one of the first things I would look into. Thank you.
Thank you, Clayton. Dan?
Well, first of all, I believe in letting public safety officers do their job. I've had discussions with the fire marshal, with the fire chief about how the job's being done. In fact, what they do is they go in, they inspect, they try to work with businesses to bring them into compliance when they find problems, and that's what they should do. The cost is not onerous. If you have a significant issue, sometimes there is some cost to address that, but they're always working with businesses, trying to make sure that they work with them so they can be successful businesses.
Thank you, Dan. Steve?
Excuse me. The city imposed a fire occupation permit program at $120 per inspection. When we contacted the state fire people, they actually laughed at us and said, "Are you serious? Bellingham is actually doing that?" It's a way to create revenue, so let's be upfront, not come in and say, "We're here to inspect you to see if you're okay. We're here to get some bucks out of you because it's another revenue stream." And when the state of Washington's fire people laughingly say, "You're the only city in the state of Washington doing this," we've got to question that, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Steve. Kelly?
I think as mayor, you always have to examine whether or not something is being done to generate revenue or for regulatory protection purposes for fire safety, whatever it is. And I would do that. There are times when things are necessary because you do need to protect public health and safety. If it's just for revenue, then I think that's the wrong way to generate revenue.
Clayton?
Well, all I have to say is that I couldn't agree with these inspection fees if they're not actually increasing safety. And it seems to me that's part of the fire department's job. If it's true that other cities aren't charging for this kind of thing, it sounds like just another fee and something that makes Bellingham just that much more not friendly to business. I don't think they do these kinds of things in Ferndale and Linden. And I don't think it's a good move for Bellingham.
Thank you, Clayton. I've avoided this question as long as possible. Everyone knows, I think, where we're going next. We'll start with Steve. Please let us know your position on the Gateway Pacific Terminal and describe your vision for how and if Bellingham would engage under your leadership in the environmental impact review that will be conducted over the next 2 years.
I'm 100% in favor of the SSA Gateway Pacific Terminal. I have been since February when I first heard about it. I suggested to the current board of directors of the chamber that they get on board and support it. I have been out in front from it from the day one, and when I decided to run for mayor, I was also out in front of it again. I'm 100% in favor of it. Now, having said that, the city of Bellingham has no standing in whether they will allow it or not allow it. However, the city of Bellingham does have the opportunity through the EIS to impose questions that we hope will be answered, and that the feds and the state will accept that we want answers to certain questions. The noise ordinance is coming to the city of Bellingham, how we're going to handle the traffic. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not coal. I'm so tired of hearing that it's coal, 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 we don't want coal. Well, then tomorrow we're going to stop sulfuric acid tank cars coming through here, chlorine tank cars from coming through here. This is about jobs. This is about something that this community decided back in the mid-'80s that they wanted heavy industrial development up there. We need to do this. It's jobs then, it's jobs that are continuing, it's business creation, which is additional jobs, and to stand in its way or to vote for somebody because they say, I don't want coal, that's absurd. That's a one-issue thing. The mayor, in 2012 and for 4 years, does many more things than just whether they stop a coal train from coming through Bellingham.
Kelly?
Well, I've actually known about this pier for quite a while, longer than that. I was in the governor's office in 1997 when we signed the major projects permit on the pier that is part of our comprehensive plan, the multipurpose pier at Cherry Point. And I have also always supported that pier. When I saw the project's plans in December of this year, I had to step back about 2 steps, not because I don't support development of a pier, but because I do not want a single-purpose coal pier built at Cherry Point that will not be able to rise and fall with the changes in the economy. Right now, coal is very profitable to export because the economy is bad. We want our economy to get better. If our economy gets better and we've built a pier that can only export coal, then we have made a bad decision for Cherry Point because it's not going to be sustainable. So I have chosen to step back and to be very consistent and say I want to be engaged in this process as the mayor. I do not want to change my mind at least 3 times in this process, and I want to be in the room as we talk about the impacts on Bellingham. We have done some good things so far. We've asked for a new permit. We've asked to co-lead by the DOE, and now we need to look at the impacts on Bellingham and make sure that we're getting the multi-purpose pier that we were promised in our comprehensive plan, and that's what I would fight for as mayor.
Clayton?
It's irresponsible for any candidate to wholeheartedly support or oppose the coal terminal before the EIS regarding that terminal has been completed. We need to talk about facts, and that process will discover those facts. And as Kelly mentioned, we've already, because of our process, had them resubmit for a new permit because the old permit was not for coal. And that needs to be studied. I've read hundreds of pages of studies about a need for a container port on the West Coast. There's very little land available for that kind of thing, and I would really like for the EIS to study the impacts of a container port in tandem with their study for the bulk port, because if the bulk port gets stuck in court or something like that, then if SSA wanted to, they could move on with a container port, which is in very high demand. And Bellingham needs to participate thoroughly throughout this entire process. I think coming out against the port at the very start has really harmed Bellingham's potential effect in this process. We're starting from a fight position instead of a cooperation position, and the railroads and SSA are already coming at this with knowing that we have a negative attitude about it, and I don't think we're going to receive the mitigation we would have otherwise.
Dan?
Well, I guess I'm irresponsible because I will say I am against this facility. I think it is good to wait for facts. If you read the application, you can get a boatload of facts. You can get facts like the fact that the project has changed from about 8 million tons per year of export to 54 million tons, that it changed from a multi-purpose bulk facility to one that is predominantly coal with potentially other things being added at some point in the future, maybe if the market conditions warrant it. We do have a voice, and frankly the mayor ought to be exercising a voice to protect this community. And I'm glad to hear that people are happy now that the effect of me exercising my voice as your mayor has been that other cities up and down the line joined me in expressing concerns to the state about the capacity for the county by itself to examine something that's not just a local or county issue, but in fact is a regional, state, national, international issue. And now the state is going to join in in a co-EIS lead situation through the Department of Ecology. I think that's exactly what I hope for. It's what everybody in this community should hope for. The difference between this and cars of other types that come through is that usually under the Interstate Commerce Clause, you can't impact what happens on rail lines. Because in this case we're coming at it through the environmental impact process, we can, we should, and if I'm mayor, we will.
That's time. Steve? 30 seconds.
I guess if we brought wheat or tofu through, it'd be okay. And that's why I say it's not about coal. This is about jobs, this is about economic development, this is about something that's been designed and zoned that way for the last 25 years. It's about a development that's going to bring things to the forefront. It may be coal today, but those are market-driven issues and market-driven commodities, and by the time this structure is built and completed and ready to go online, coal may not even be the commodity that has to go through there. So let's get off the coal thing. Let's look at the development and the jobs.
Thank you, Steve. Kelly?
Well, I guess I have one question to ask, and that was, why would someone propose an ordinance to City Council in support of a project they didn't have enough information about? That, I think, is an irresponsible thing to do. And I also think that indicating that a mayor of a city or several mayors of a city are the only people that can force the governor to do the right thing is quite arrogant. And I think that the governor would have made this decision with or without Bellingham's involvement.
Thank you, Kelly. Clayton?
Well, it is about beans and tofu sometimes. If we were to encourage an intermodal facility, it would greatly increase our farm-to-market capabilities of Whatcom County. It's one of the biggest problems we have here is shipping. Bellingham itself has a problem shipping. Everything has to go to Seattle if it's going to go anywhere. And we need to encourage proper development and mitigate any sort of impacts that it has here. And that's why coming out against it without the facts was the wrong thing to do.
Thank you, Clayton. Dan?
This is about jobs. It's not just about the couple hundred jobs that might be provided permanently from this facility, but it's also the jobs at BP, ConocoPhillips, Alcoa, and the refineries in Anacortes, as well as other businesses that we might get to land here that have some pollution aspects to them that might not be able to come here if our air quality falls out of compliance. We almost went out of compliance 2 years ago. If this project, because of the 500 ships per year docking, burning, this could put those jobs at risk.
Thank you, Dan. I think we've got time for one more question before closing statements, and of course I've got several more here, so I'll take the moderator's prerogative and ask one that probably you haven't been asked before, and that is about the airport. And if I've got this right, we're going to start with Kelly. The Bellingham Airport has, in the last 4 years, gone from 120,000 travelers to 400,000 travelers, making it the #3 airport in the state of Washington. With airports seen by many experts as economic drivers, and with so much fallow land around our airport, what do you think about the potential for our airport as an economic engine, and what role would you play as mayor?
Well, maybe you should have asked someone first who doesn't live right where in the flight path.
Okay, Kelly has passed, we'll go to Clayton.
No, we bought our house on Eldridge Avenue, 75 feet from the railroad tracks and in close proximity of the airport, and we knew that when we bought our property. So I'm just being a little facetious. But I do think that it's important, if we're going to expand our airport, which does bring some economic benefit to the community, that it also does not impact the community so negatively that it outweighs the economic benefit. And I don't know enough about the economics of the airport to say how many of the dollars that are spent in the flights and everything else benefit the city. I'd need to find that out. But I think that you have to have an even benefit. There are going to be impacts if we expand the airport. Ask the people in Seattle about the third runway. And there are going to be economic benefits, and we need to examine those. So I wouldn't be hasty in making jumping into a decision. But I think that air travel out of Bellingham is very convenient for a lot of people, including me, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kelly. Clayton?
Well, I went to a port meeting a little while ago, and they were talking about some of the things they'd like to do at the airport. One of them is bigger airplanes, more people, same amount of flights. And actually what it turns out is these airplanes, these bigger ones, are actually quieter, and they'll impact our community less as far as noise. But they'll bring more people through, more money, and I think that's a really good thing. So just because the airport might expand or have bigger flights doesn't mean that it's going to be worse or anything like that. So you have to really take a look at each thing that they want to do out there, each expansion or each change, and judge it by its merits.
Thank you, Clayton. Dan?
Well, I want to say, first of all, if you want to find out about the third runway or about expanding airports, Charlie Sheldon's a great guy to ask. He's the new port director. He managed the third runway project, successfully got it done on time, on budget for the Port of Seattle before he came up here. So we've got a great resource there to start with. Airports are a significant part of the decision process for businesses and where they land. And so I think the fact that we've got a robust airport is a huge economic advantage that we have. In addition to that, because our airport is the closest American airport of any size to Canada, we've got 60% of our visitors coming down that go through that airport are coming from Canada. A lot of those folks stay in hotels. We've got 2 new hotels being built as a result of the airport expansion that's happened already. That's another great boon for this community. On top of that, the fact is that by it's expanding, it opens opportunities for all of us to travel in a more cost-effective manner. So we can go to Hawaii direct on Alaska now. I guess Allegiant's going to pick up that service pretty soon as well. So I think as we continue to see airport growth, it's going to continue helping us out as a community. Certainly we need to make sure we mitigate the impacts on the community around them, but as Clayton noted, the newer jets, the newer larger jets are actually quieter, and they're also greener, more sustainable. They use less fuel than the old jets that were flying in the old airport before it expanded.
Thank you, Dan. Steve?
I agree.
All right. Cool.
Airports are good. Tourism is good. Economic engines are good. Economically driven businesses are good. I don't see any downside. Kelly, you may have to move if you don't want to hear more airplanes, I guess.
I think Clayton's reassured me that it'll be better.
No, the airports are great.
Outstanding. Any rebuttals from any of you on this? I think if we can, we actually may have time for one more, since this was an easier one. Let's go ahead and do that then. And we will start with Clayton on this. And this is going to be on relations with the county. While interactions with some members of the staff from the City of Bellingham and Whatcom County are cordial and productive, relations at the highest level have at times been strained. Do you believe it is important to have a positive, healthy relationship with the county executive, and what would you do to promote it?
Well, it's just the fact that you're asking the question shows how difficult the situation is right now. Absolutely, it's extremely important to have a good relationship with the county executive and the county council. Things have changed since the start of the race. The current executive is not going to run for executive, so it could be any one of 4 people. I think I know all of them, at least to some degree, and I think they're all great guys. And I think that we have to start with a little bit more conversation and a little bit less litigation. And we can work through some of these things. Bellingham's not going to get its way on every single issue. And at the staff level, it's already been revealed that we have pretty good staff-to-staff relations. They talk all the time, and they work on all kinds of projects together. There's some philosophical differences at the higher level that I think haven't been handled very well, and I think I would do a much better job communicating with the next executive.
Thank you, Clayton. Dan?
Well, I think, first of all, we all want to have good relations with people we work with. And to the extent that interests are aligned and goals are aligned, I think those relationships work fine. I recently was at a ribbon cutting, for example, for an affordable housing project with the executive, and we talk to each other, we get things done when we agree. But I'm not actually elected as mayor, and no one should, I think, be serving as mayor to be friends with other elected officials. Rather, they should be mayor to do the work of representing this community and protecting the interests of this community. And sometimes that gets uncomfortable because the interests, as I understand them from talking to community members, aren't always the same as folks in other elected positions see them. And so there have been times where we've reached an impasse, and frankly the reason you have courts is because sometimes you reach an impasse and neither side can agree. The courts are the referees. I will say that every time I've gone to court, the city council, generally unanimously, has authorized me to do so. So this isn't me going out, you know, on a cowboy mission to just file lawsuits. It's the city as a government entity with council authorization saying, you know what, protecting the lake is important, reducing sprawl and the cost that puts on our community are important. Protecting this community is my job, and I will continue doing that.
Thank you, Dan. I think we're going to let Steve get himself together here, and we'll go to Kelly.
You okay, or you want to
What did I say?
Do you want to go ahead and just wait a second, and we'll go to Kelly and come back to you, or?
I'll go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, well, Kelly, why don't we go ahead and have you, and then we'll take it.
Do you want to get a glass?
I'm going to bring a glass of water there.
Making me choke. Okay. Obviously, I represented county and city interests for a very long time. And the reason that I could do that successfully is because I can listen, I can identify common ground, and I can work towards results. I truly believe that once you've gone to court, you've given up your right to represent Bellingham to your best ability because it's an arbitrary decision that gets made. I personally believe that suing someone early and then expecting them to want to negotiate with you is the wrong order of business. You need to work hard first, and then if you have to go to court, which I agree is sometimes necessary, you've done everything possible you can besides just insist that it has to be your way. That isn't the way you negotiate. That isn't the way you find results. I feel sorry for him. I also think that I have relationships with everybody that's running for county executive, and I know that I could continue working with them as I have over the last 17 years, and I wouldn't have to, I certainly wouldn't be unprepared or unwilling to make some compromises that still protect Bellingham's interests. I think it's important to know that you can't be an island and think that you're doing the very best for your city. Bellingham is the city seat in the county, the county seat, and it's also part of Whatcom County, and we all need to focus on solutions.
Thank you, Kelly. Steve?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. The mayor of Bellingham is the employee of the citizens of Bellingham. The county executive is the employee of the citizens of Whatcom County. In Bellingham, we have the unique situation or position that we're both Bellingham and Whatcom County. So I do believe that the county executive and the mayor can be friends, because all of us have friends. We know there's many times where we disagree. And even after we get into debates and disagreements and everything else, we can still go have a beer, even though we may not agree with each other. So while the mayor's position is the one to protect and take care of the citizens of Bellingham, just as the executives is for the entire Whatcom County, I believe that with any one of the four that would be elected, I know all four of them very well. In fact, two of them are past clients of mine, and that we can agree to disagree, and that we can sit down on a weekly basis, discuss those things of commonality, discuss those things that we disagree about, and then try to find resolution. As a commercial real estate broker for the last 37 years, my job has always been not to sell something, but to bring the two parties together. They might not agree, but at least we can start to get resolution, and going to lawsuits or not wanting to talk to someone or disagree with them in the public is not the way to do it.
Thank you, Steve. We'll go to the rebuttals. Let's start with Clayton.
I don't have
No
any
rebuttals?
rebuttal.
Dan?
Well, again, I'll also say that I get along fine with, I think, every one of the executive candidates that's running. I work fine with Pete when there's things that we need to work together on that we agree on. But again, I think, and I don't go to court as the first resort. But there are times when there's a fundamental difference of opinion and there is a critical issue that needs protection by the city, by the mayor, by the council, and I will advocate for this community in those situations. I have in the past and I will going forward.
Thank you, Dan. Steve?
No rebuttal. I just said what I had to say.
Kelly?
Well, I guess all I'd say is there's a difference between resolving problems and wanting your way. And you have to be willing to get off your specific solution sometimes and get the problem solved for the people you represent.
Thank you, Kelly. Before we go to closing statements, just a couple of announcements for our viewing audience. The Chamber's Leadership Walk-in program is in the middle of accepting students. If you're interested in that, you can find information at bellingham.com. There are 3 scheduled times that this debate will be shown. Thursday the 21st at 8:30 p.m., Monday the 25th at 11 a.m., Tuesday the 26th at 3 p.m., and other times after that, or you can go to the city's website at cob.org and watch it at any time. We will have the County Execs Forum 1 week from today, Tuesday, July the 26th at 7:30 a.m. here in the same facility, and we'd certainly welcome anyone who would like to join us. We want to thank our sponsors, the Best Western Lakeway Inn, Whatcom Sound, Puget Sound Energy, Woodby Island Bank, KVOS TV, and BTV10. Thank you all very much for assisting with this presentation today. We will have our closing statements of 1 minute each, and we will start with Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Ken. I entered the race to give everyone a choice that we haven't had for many, many years, at least for the 21 years I've been here. And that is a choice between picking someone who works in business and intends to use the principles of business to run government, because government can't run like a business. I am a person of yes. If you picked up my flyers, albeit very limited number out there, because they've all been given away or picked up, you'll see many of the things that I stand for. And what I stand for is this: no to the red light cameras. No to personal agenda by staff and not following the consistency of the rules and regulations of code, because we are a nation and a city of law. I am yes that we have consistency of those laws, regulations, and codes. I am yes to the Gateway specific terminal project, and I would urge you to vote yes for Steve Moore to make a difference and to have a change within the city of Bellingham for the next 4 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mayor Pike?
Thank you. 4 years ago, I got elected, as I said, in a very challenging environment. And during that 4 years, the crime rate has been reduced. People feel better about this community, as a place to live. They feel better about their neighborhoods than they did 4 years ago. And they feel better about their parks and libraries than they did 4 years ago. I think that given the context of the times, that's a pretty remarkable achievement. And certainly I didn't do it by myself. There are many, many people in the city that helped with that. But I think things start at the top, and I think that the leadership that we have in place right now is critical as we continue to face challenging times in at least the next few years. So I would ask for your support going forward to continue managing the city in the very effective manner that I've done over the last 4 years. And I'd also say that one of the things you'll get with me is I will tell you where I stand. So whenever there's an issue coming forward, certainly if you have a question about where I am, ask me and I'll tell you.
Thank you, Mayor Pike. Mr. Petrie?
Please don't be tempted to blame all of Bellingham's financial woes on the recession. Think of the sales tax we've lost as big ticket items like furniture, hot tubs, and stoves are purchased in other cities from companies that were in Bellingham. Think how much business, occupation, and property tax Bellingham has lost as major beverage companies abandon our city because it's difficult to do business here. Bellingham has looked down its nose at business for too long. The city has been permanently harmed by this attitude, especially over the last decade. A 1997 report says, an acknowledged problem is that the cost of housing in Bellingham has increased much faster than have wages. This affordability problem is not likely to diminish until a broader base of better wage jobs is attracted and established in the Bellingham area. That was 97. This attitude toward business will change if I'm mayor. I will do everything possible to stop the hemorrhaging of our economic base as we see today, and I'll begin to do what I can to give our economy a transfusion in the form of new and expanding opportunity for private business in our community. Thanks for listening, and please vote Petrie for mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Petrie. Representative Linville?
My vision for Bellingham is that we are the most livable livable city in the country. And livable does not just mean the amenities that we have. Livable means able to live and work in the same place. That means people need jobs, people need affordable housing, and the amenities, the trails, the parks, the open space that those revenues bring to our city. I believe the city needs new leadership. We need a better manager in City Hall. Someone can manage both budgets and staff to get the best results for the city. And I want to bring my expertise and my experience and my lifelong history here to be your mayor, to lead this city into a better prosperity using the innovation and the excitement and the talents of the people that live and work in Bellingham. And I would ask you to vote for Kelly Linville for mayor of Bellingham. Thank you.
Representative Linville, Mr. Petrie, Mayor Pike, Mr. Moore, thank you all very much. We appreciate your time today. Don't forget that ballots go in the mail on July 29th. Be sure to vote and make sure your voice is heard. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week here for the County Execs Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.